Thank you so much for this. This is amazing. Well, let's get started because I know you have a very tight time. Thank
Sure,
you. Thank you
sure.
so much, Shelly. It's a great honor. You know, you're one of my inspirations and also a girl crush, as they say. Um,
You're too nice.
I am very familiar with your bio, but for our audience, can you please share a little bit about your background, education, and also your history with Ogilvy?
So it's sort of it's hard to talk about because my whole career was an accident. So it's sort of certain people have plans and they march down a certain path. But I went to Smith. I went to an all women's college. I was a liberal arts person. I majored in psychology and government. Um, I never really intended to have a career. I graduated from college in 1968. Women at that time were not thinking in terms of careers. But I was in love. I wanted to get married. We wanted to get married, and my fiance was in medical school. So one of us was going to have to go to work if we wanted to get married. So I launched myself into the commercial world. And what I discovered if you were a woman in 1968 and you wanted to do something in the commercial world, you were going to have to type. Uh, and those were the days of typewriters. And you could pick where you wanted to type, but you were going to be typing. So I went on all these interviews with banks and insurance companies and all that. And I thought they were sort of like executive positions. And it turned out in every instance that it was all about typing. So some HR person, because I must have looked so crestfallen when I discovered that yet again is a typing job, said to me, I'll bet if you got an MBA, they couldn't make you type. So by the way, it was a hypothesis. It was not a sure thing.
Oh my
But
God.
and here's a great confession. I actually didn't know what an MBA was. But I found out, I went and I discovered that lo and behold, Columbia, where my now husband was at medical school, they had an MBA program. And not only that, but it started in the summer. So you could go through in 15 months. You could go through pretty rapidly. And so knowing nothing, never having worked, I showed up at Columbia Business School. I was one of 4 women in a class of 300.
Oh,
We're all still kind of friends.
oh my God.
And remember, I went from an all women's college to 10 days later, because I started in the summer, a business school that had only 4 women in the entire class. And it was great. I actually loved it. I had a great experience. I had no context because I had never worked. So, but I was just kind of absorbing all of it. And then I went, I actually couldn't do 4 semesters straight. I needed a break. And so I did an internship at General Foods, which is now Kraft. I was the first woman to work in a professional capacity in the Maxwell House division. I did that for 3 months and I loved it. So that was the great thing, is that I found something I really loved doing. And then when I finished my MBA, I went and I started at Clairol. I started on the client side. And I just loved it. So when I was an intern, though, at General Foods, our advertising agency was Ogilvy. And 2 years into my time at Clairol, I got a call from a headhunter who said, we have this job at Ogilvy. They want someone who knows something about hair. And so here I was at Clairol. I was your girl. I had no intention of leaving, but I thought, oh, Ogilvy, I haven't seen all my old friends, from the summer for so long. I'll just go over and say hi. And I just sort of, I got hooked. And so I went to Ogilvy. I had no intention of staying more than 2 years I thought I've done some client side, I do agency side, and then I would figure it out. So I went and I never left. And that is sort of my whole story. I loved everything I was doing. Every once in a while, someone would come in and put a new title on my head. And I would go, okay, that's great, but now I got to get back to doing this work for my clients. And then, not to make it sound simplistic, and then one day the call was to be the CEO of the global company. And that's really, it's as simple as that. I mean, it was just, it was an accident that turned into a straight line.
That's amazing. But, I feel like the common thread is that you loved what you did
Exactly.
every moment.
Yeah, and I always said it never felt like work. I didn't know what that meant. It was just sort of, I was excited to go into work every day.
And during that time, you had 3 children.
I did.
How did you work that out? And your husband's a doctor, obviously. He's working a lot of hours.
Right. Well, I think, again, it's the same thought that, people would say to me, how did you decide to be a working mother? And it was the same kind of thing, that I loved what I was doing. And just because I had a child who I loved, as I had my first child, I didn't see why I couldn't do 2 things that I loved. So that I would just make it work. And I did. One of the things I found is that you can fit into your life everything you love. And what's hard to fit in are things you find unfulfilling, dull, tedious. But if it's something you love, you just kind of figure out how to do it. And so, I have 3 children. It's sort of, there were some days that required more juggling than others. But I sort of always knew what my priorities were, and I just made it all work.
Fantastic. And what is your leadership style, and what would your 3 recommendations be for professional women?
So I guess you would say I share leadership. I mean, I think one of the most important things a leader does is to figure out the team of people who you want to work with, because you can't do anything alone. One of the things I've discovered is, from the very beginning, is unless you have the right team of people around you, you can't get anything done. You don't need a lot of them, but you need some. And leadership is a shared experience. And so I always focused on that. And then I think the leader, in consultation with the team, sets the direction, sets the goals, and frankly, then kind of gets out of the way. You have to believe in people and let them, and believe that they are going to do what you and they have agreed are the goals. And I think to be there to support them, to help them when they need help. But I do think that great leaders are inherently generous. They share the problem, they share the applause at the end, and that to me is extremely important. So picking the team, being clear about the goals, sharing the problems and the glory. Those would be 3 things that I would definitely point to. I'd make one other point is it takes courage to be a leader. There are moments where you think, God, I don't know if I can do this. But if you don't think you can do it, why would anyone join with you? And so there are certain moments where you're scared to death. But nonetheless, you kind of go, okay, we're moving forward. I had an observation a few years ago that for like 3/4 of my career, I was probably scared. And that I used
Oh.
to think it was I used to think it was a bad thing. Then I realized it was actually a very good thing because it shows that you're learning and growing. If you're not a little bit scared, and you're scared because you've never done this before, you don't know what the outcome's going to be, you don't know what all the moves are. So if you don't feel that little bit of fear when you're about to do something, it's probably not a big enough thing to do.
Complacency,
Right.
comfortable. That's
Comfortable is not good. No,
that's
comfortable is not good.
fantastic.
Right.
I mean, talking about fear, I sort of talk to a lot of small business owners with this pandemic going on, so much noise out there, the world has turned upside down and sideways. What is your point of view? How do you think the world will change after this pandemic? And what would your recommendation be for small brands as, CEO of Ogilvy?
So I think it's foolhardy to try to predict consumer behavior. I've tried it many times. I've always been wrong. So you don't actually know how it's going to work out. And one of the things these days that I'm constantly reminded of is after 9/11, everyone said New York City is over. Not gonna come back. No one's gonna live here. No one wants to be here. And sort of we slowly worked on bringing it back. So that's sort of my hope is always that. But I think, frankly, for small brands, disruption is probably a good thing. And everybody is disrupted. No one's behavior patterns are the same. People are doing things in different ways, ways they've never done things before. And all of a sudden, new brands are coming forward and people are trying them. So I think you just have to have faith that if you have something, a proposition, an offering that is appealing to some group of people, you just kind of have to stay with it and just keep going. My son and daughter-in-law were staying with us in the country for a while, and they brought these new brands in I never heard of, but they're fantastic. I mean, just Thrive is a grocery offering, and and it's so I do think it's a moment when people are open to trying new things because everything they're doing is now different. So I think it's a moment of opportunity if you can just hang in there and just keep believing.
That's fantastic. What an encouragement. Another thing that's been talked about a lot is Black Lives Matter, and a lot of brands either supporting it or getting a backlash for not doing enough or doing too much. What is your point of view on that? And, do you feel like there's a brand that's been doing really well?
No, I was very taken with a survey that was done, I would say a few weeks after the whole Black Lives Matter movement sort of started. And the question they asked the public was, do you think that these statements that all these companies are making, are they pandering or are they real? And 2/3 of the people asked that it's pandering. And so my feeling is it's time to stop talking about all this and doing something. So I actually think you're vulnerable if you make a big statement and then nothing happens. So it's all a focus now on what are you going to do about it? And I think that's what, we have to look at and see. And I'm a little concerned. A man recently on a call said jokingly, I'm almost embarrassed to say that our choice for the next leader is a white man. And I just, that to me is just absurd. Diversity includes all of us. So I think we have to be thoughtful about moving forward, but I do think we have to, we can keep talking, but until we start doing things, nothing different is going to happen. And so we'll just wait and see if will and commitment, get you 2/3 of the way there. I think we have will and commitment. Now we got to do something.
Exactly. Action. Speak
Action.
louder.
Yeah, right.
And talking about brands, what are some of the brands throughout the history that you thought were just amazing from 360 point of view, from brand positioning, product, to how they treated their customers?
Yeah. So now you asked me to talk about my own babies, right? So I always point to Dove because it started as a bar of soap, right? It's just sort of it's actually not soap. It's actually cold cream condensed in a bar, and it really is a different product. But it's from the beginning, it stood for so much more than its product form. It was a point of view about women. It had a point of view about beauty. Yes. From the start, it was sort of you as beautiful as you could possibly be, natural beauty. And I think it's easy to do one campaign, one splashy campaign. What's really, really hard is growing a brand over decades. That's really, really hard, because also the temptation is, oh, it's so good right now, we're just going to leave it the way it is. Yeah. But you have to keep growing it and making sure that its meaning is relevant for the time. And so if you look at Dove, and up to this point, where you have the campaign for real beauty, it just kept evolving. I have enormous regard for Nike as well. And, in that regard, that it started with a point of view about, what people could achieve athletically. And it's never lost that point of view, but it remains interesting no matter which year we're in. And so I think that is really the measure of, do you understand the DNA of your brand? Because the universal, there are some things that will never, ever change. And you need to know what those things are. They are constant, time in, time out. Now, having said that, the way you express that DNA, I think has to change as values and customs and culture changes over time. So, but I think where people make a mistake is they don't understand what that core is. And they think changing means you change the core. No, never. You never change the core.
And it takes time. And it takes time to build these brands.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I always tell these stories about, there's a new CEO in town, right? And he comes in and he goes, I don't like my brand, and you go, why? And he says, because it's too old. It's not, with it. It's not sexy. It's kind of old and tired. And, and he goes, I want a new brand. I want to be young and hip and relevant to the people who are doing things and all that. And you go, you can't just sort of take something that's existed for 50 years and sort of say, actually, not that. Here's who we really are. And so I think there's some wisdom in recognizing what you are at your core and just kind of making it relevant for the time we live in now.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I believe in that core DNA, and obviously modifying it and growing up with your consumer base, but still keeping that core substance. I don't know if you read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, but fantastic story. Think about uncomfortableness. It took, more than 10 years to build Nike.
Well, and so, man, Phil Knight said something years and years ago. I was on a panel with him in Davos, actually. And I've never forgotten it. It is one of the core truths of branding. He said, whenever we start to lose our way at Nike, he said, I go back to the running track and talk to the runners, because that's where I started. That's where the heart of my company is. And it reminds me again of what I stand for. And I just thought that was brilliant. Now, to me, that's become sort of a phrase of, I go back to the running track when you want to understand and be reminded of what your brand really stands for.
That's fantastic quote. I mean, I actually truly love that book. And whenever I have, there are times where I'm going through a huge bump, I always think back and say, you know what? It took Nike over 10 years.
Right.
I'm just at the beginning.
And never forget where you came from. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
My question, I know you, there's been a lot of comparison between Man, and you. Did you watch it? And any thoughts on it?
So I've watched it here and there. In truth, the plot's a little slow for me. But here's what I will say. I think the art direction is fantastic. I think they captured, what it felt like, not just in the office, but in the Connecticut suburbs. It was just sort of, I remember that time. Now, just to sort of position me, Mad Men, when it started, was the 50s. And I came into advertising in the 70s. But there was enough left over sort of that I could recognize everything that was in Mad Men. There were some changes. There was you didn't drink in the office. In the 70s, you did go across the street. Right across the street was the place everybody went, and there were 3 martini lunches. There was that. When I joined Ogilvy, there weren't many women in management, but there were some. Every single one of them had started as a secretary. That was the truth. So they captured that, and I think the sort of general sense of the swaggering leaders and all that. So I do think it was a brilliant portrayal of what was that industry.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I watched that from the beginning till the last second.
I know there are people who love it. I know. I just, there are people who are just hooked on it. I know that.
So we're running out of time. I have my last question. Do you have a favorite pair of shoe, and can you tell us why?
Oh God, yes, I love Ferragamo. I'm a big Ferragamo wearer. It's black patent. I also love shiny shoes, and it's got a little bow on it. It's not the classic sort of Ferragamo. It's sort of a variation on it. But I love Italian shoes. I do. I find them the most comfortable, and I try to always have them. But those are definitely my favorite pair of shoes. I haven't worn them since March. It's just, I don't need to, right?
Yeah. Well, Shelly, thank you so much for this insight to your career, your thought, your point of view on in world. I think our viewers will very, very much appreciate listening to you. They probably have more questions after this than they had ever before watching this. So thank you, Shelly.
Come in and invite me back. I'm happy to answer the questions.
I would love to. Oh my God, that was fantastic.
Take care.
All right. Bye, Shelly.
Bye, man.